You're watching Reality Check. As threats have risen to democratic principles of free speech and individual liberty, so have concerns over the effectiveness of institutions meant to act as checks and balances. But a series of recent bail orders by courts appear to indicate that the judiciary, or at least a part of it, is stepping up to the role as a gatekeeper of democratic norms. Let's begin with today's order by a Delhi trial court granting bail to Disha Ravi, the 22-year-old arrested by the Delhi police in the so-called toolkit case and charged with sedition, accused of drafting a document along with overseas secessionist groups as part of a conspiracy, the Delhi police claims, to incite violence on Republic Day. Now, the police charges were fantastical to begin with, and they are now being methodically dismantled in the judge's 18-page order. The judge has said there is no direct evidence establishing the link between Disha Ravi and the Republic Day violence. No direct link between her and Mo Dhaliwal, the founder of the Poetic Justice Foundation, said to be pro-Khalistan. The Poetic Justice Foundation, the order says, is not a banned organization. Any person with dubious credentials, like Mo Dhaliwal, for instance, may interact with a number of persons, but as long as the engagement remains lawful, people interacting with such persons can't be painted with the same hue. The creation of a WhatsApp group or being an editor of an innocuous toolkit is not an offense. Since the link with the toolkit or a PJF, Poetic Justice, has not been found to be objectionable, deleting the WhatsApp chat, which is what the police have accused Disha Ravi of doing, also becomes meaningless. Except for pointing out that the accused, in this case Disha Ravi, forwarded the toolkit to Greta Thunberg, the prosecution failed to point out as to how Disha gave global audience to quote-unquote secessionist elements. Considering, the judge said while concluding, the scanty and sketchy evidence available, I don't find any palpable reasons to not grant bail to a 22-year-old young lady with no criminal antecedents. Now, what makes this order significant, this order by Judge Dharmendra Rana, is that it doesn't just limit itself to poking holes in the evidence. It also goes on to make a series of statements which have a profound significance for the ongoing tension between civil liberties and the excesses of the state. The judge says the perusal of the said toolkit reveals that any call for any kind of violence is conspicuously absent. Citizens are conscience keepers of the government in any democratic nation. They cannot be put behind the bars simply because they choose to disagree with the state policies. The offense of sedition cannot be invoked to minister to the wounded vanity of the governments. The right to dissent is firmly enshrined under Article 19 of the Constitution. In mind, the judge's considered opinion, the freedom of speech and expression includes the right to seek a global audience. There are no geographical barriers on communication. A citizen has the fundamental rights to use the best means of imparting and receiving communication as long as the same is permissible under four corners of the law and as such have access to audience abroad. Now, the same judge had issued a similar order while granting bail to two individuals accused of putting out posts during the farmers' protest. This is what the same judge, Dharmendra Rana, said. He said the law of sedition cannot be invoked to quieten the disquiet under the pretense of muzzling the miscreants. The invoking of Section 124A, which is the sedition law, he said, is a seriously debatable issue. Now, this order comes hard on the heels of a bail order granting bail to Varavara Rao, the aged gentleman who's been accused in the Bhima Koregaon case. This is the Bombay High Court, which said that the continued incarceration of Varavara Rao will violate his rights under Article 21, which is the right to life and liberty. We do not appreciate or agree with the NIA's stand that no relief should be granted because of the gravity of offence. The NIA can't argue that granting bail on health grounds will lead to a deluge of bail petitions. Despite serious charges, can't be forced to live a subhuman existence behind bars. And then, of course, who can forget what the Supreme Court said in the Arnab Goswami case, granting him bail. It will be a travesty of justice if bail is not granted while the FIR is pending. If constitutional courts don't interfere, we're travelling the path of destruction. Governments should ignore taunts on television. We must send a message today to the high courts as well. Please exercise your jurisdiction to uphold personal liberty. If state governments target individuals, they must realize there is an apex court to protect the liberty of citizens. All right, let's go across to panel. We've got a great panel. Mahua Moitra, Lok Sabha MP of the Trinamool Congress, is with us. Dushyant Dave, senior lawyer, Supreme Court, and former head of the Supreme Court Bar Association. Ashutosh Varshney, professor of political science at Brown University in America. And last but not the least, Desha Nigam, political analyst, supports the RSS. Mahua Moitra, let me start with you. There's been a lot of praise for this order today granting bail to Disha Ravi. But as I mentioned at the outset, this was always an egregiously bad case by the police. But just the fact that a court has actually stood up and dismantled it is itself in this current time we're in, it seems like a huge leap forward.
Yes, Srinivas, that is something, that's something I have brought up consistently over the past year and a half, is that we are living in such chaotic time where even to speak the truth is a revolutionary act. And indeed, to actually throw out these ludicrous charges and for any member of the judiciary to come out and even give a reasoned order that stands up for what we believe were safeguards in Part 3 of our Constitution is coming out that, oh, he's a revolutionary, this is a fantastic order. I mean, the fact that sedition is still on our books is itself a joke. The fact that 21-year-old climate activists are picked up and booked on this is a joke. And the fact that they are even discussing this in a country like India on national television after 70 years of being independent is itself a joke. So I think we all need to step back and take a long, hard look at ourselves, at what India has become, at the democratic pillars like the media and the judiciary, and how our constitutional freedoms are sort of under such threat that even somebody somewhere, little spark that we think is a big flame.
Okay.
So while I like the order and I love it, I also feel sad that it is one among, I don't know,
many.
One among
that
Dushyant, getting hard.
Okay. Dushyant Dave, you've been very vocal in your criticism of the judiciary for not stepping up. Now, as you see these recent spate of orders, what do you make of it? Indra Jaisingh, who I spoke to earlier, we'll have her on later on in the show, she said that it appears that the courts are waking up to the abuse of law. Are they waking up?
See, there are many things that I would like to tell your viewers. First and foremost, I must disagree with Mahua, for whom I have great respect and affection, that this discussion is not a joke. It's a very serious discussion. And we need to discuss more and more and more. Not that just because the bail has been granted today. We must remember one thing, that we have a constitution. And the constitution has conferred upon all of us, the citizens, fundamental rights. We have legal rights. And the judiciary is the ultimate protector of those fundamental rights and the legal rights. So judiciary has it's a bounden duty. It's a pious duty. It's a constitutional duty on the part of the judiciary to really ensure that citizens' constitutional, fundamental and legal rights are protected to the hilt.
Yes.
So to that extent, what the judge has done is really doing his job. And, one must say that it is, I hats off, salute to the judge that in the circumstances when judges are very circumspect in, protecting citizens' rights, since 2014, we still have judges because, let us understand one thing. Yes. Subordinate judiciary is the backbone of judicial system.
Absolutely.
Supreme Court, is the ultimate court. High Court may be the, appellate court. But subordinate judiciary is very important. And therefore, this order or the order by the Bombay High Court in Varava's case, or, even that for that matter, Supreme Court's order, releasing the comedian by Justice Nariman's bench.
Yes.
These are all extraordinary, welcome, or decisions.
Welcome judgments. Okay, let me...
welcome decisions. And I would definitely say judiciary inherently is a good institution.
Right.
Yes, it has become over the years conservative. It has become pro-establishment.
Right.
But I hope that these orders will tell other judges to be pro-citizen and protect their rights.
Okay, Ashutosh, right. Ashutosh Varshney, you wrote in today's Indian Express that India's democratic exceptionalism is now withering away. And you cited as examples some of these cases that we're talking about. Now, you've pointed out how the Modi government will turn around and argue that that's not true. The decisions that we're taking have legal sanction. We are a fully elected majority government. But as you pointed out, the world is now not looking at democracy just in terms of elections and necessarily whether you're following the rule book, but there are other reasons why the world is increasingly concerned, as you put it, about India's democratic backsliding.
Yes, so democratic theory is very clear on this, that elections are the minimal requirement for a democracy to function. What governments do between elections is also very important. And there are two more factors which are highlighted. One, whether the elected government is attacking civil liberties or preserving civil liberties. So the question of civil liberties is absolutely central. So Mr. Dave is right about that. And second, whether there are institutional checks on the executive. Now, in a presidential system, the legislature can check the executive quite a lot.
Yes.
But in a parliamentary system like India's, judiciary is the ultimate check on the government's misuse of power, abuse of power. Because the legislature is where the executive draws its power from the legislature as well, because it's the majority party in the legislature which forms the government.
Yeah.
So in a parliamentary system, the role of the judiciary is even more important than in presidential systems like the United States.
Right.
So long as the judiciary protects civil liberties, it's doing its job. And of late, that's not what was happening. And it is just as well that some new orders, some new decisions by the judiciary are beginning to support civil liberties.
Desha Nigam, firstly, Desha Nigam, do you join the panel in welcoming today's order, Desha Nigam? And if you do you think that this will make the government a little more circumspect in the arbitrary and reckless manner in which it's going after anybody who dares to question it? But first, you welcome the order.
No, let me answer. I will not give a very categorical answer here, yes or no.
Okay.
I'm very clear about it.
Okay.
Now, who sent Disha Ravi or Varvara Rao into custody? It was the court only. Nobody else. Government cannot do it. Prosecuting agencies cannot do it. It was the court who sent it, and the court released it. Released her. So let's not bring the government here. So you were very, in a manner, trying to blame the government for the custody. So let's be very clear, the courts are independent.
No, when I say the government, it is the police who makes the arrest, no?
Yes.
It is the police who charge sheets. It is the police that prosecutes. And what is the police? The police is the state.
Let me answer that. Now, at the stage of an FIR, it is only a first information, as we all know. There is an event or a crime that has happened, which was a violence on 26th of January. 400 policemen were injured. And on the other hand, the toolkits and things have come out. I'm not going into the merits.
Sure.
Because that's a subject matter of a charge sheet when the evidence will come. Now, at the stage of an FIR and investigation, evidence is always sketchy, scanty. Please remember that. And therefore, investigation and custodial interrogation is required to unearth and link the crime with the person whose prima facie name has come up. So at this stage, I do not agree that evidence is sketchy, because it has to be sketchy at this stage. Please remember that. It will come at the stage of charge sheet.
No, you're contradicting yourself. You're saying you don't agree the evidence is sketchy while you're saying it is sketchy.
No. I am saying at this stage. It will come after investigation when the investigation is complete at the stage of charge sheet.
No. Desha Nigam, you're being highly technical and procedural. I'm saying overall, you don't find this a huge setback. One second. Hold on. Hear me out. You don't think that this order or similar orders are a huge setback to the attempt to try and criminalize dissent by slapping charges of sedition or worse? Look at the language used by the judge. Look at the implications of it.
Let me tell you,
don't think so at all?
Let me tell you as a lawyer, this is a challengeable order. And I'm very clear about it as a lawyer.
I'm asking you as political analyst supports RSS.
Now let me tell you.
I'm not asking you as a lawyer.
No. Let me tell you.
Or as well, wear both hats.
So therefore, as a political analyst, you were saying there is something beyond law, beyond rules. Let me tell you, democracies all over the world are based on rule of law. As long as the law exists, it has to be implemented. If it comes within the four corners, it has to be implemented. Secondly, if it is being misused, there are courts to see it.
Okay.
And therefore, the courts, in its wisdom, sent her to the custody and released her
And the courts also released her. Okay, fair enough. Mahua Moitra, let me ask you this though, that while we make much of the erosion of democratic values and civil liberties, and we refer to the ruling regime, the central government, the fact is that we are seeing this in state after state, state governments as well. And your own state government in West Bengal is often charged of the same excesses, of going after critics, of going after your political rivals.
Tell me one example, give me one example where anybody, any journalist, any media person, any activist has been charged in West Bengal under sedition laws. Please tell me. Please tell me anywhere where we've charged anyone under the UAPA. Please tell me anyone where we have charged under any of these draconian laws that the center has done in the last 3 years. Give me one example.
No, haven't people been arrested for putting out posts against Mamata Banerjee, perhaps not with sedition laws,
I don't think
but
people
simply
have
for
been
being
put up
critical?
I don't think that that is true. There have been look, in a country there are
Chandan
a couple of
Bhattacharya.
cases. Who?
Chandan Bhattacharya, 28 years old, arrested in 2019 for putting out a derogatory post against Mamata Banerjee on Facebook. There are many examples. I'm just giving you one.
Maybe there are always cases. I, for one, am not at all. I'm not going to stand here and defend cases of police excess. I, for one, think that we as a nation take ourselves far too seriously, and there should be room for even humorous dissent and it's sort of natural cartoons and all of that.
Right.
So I think that is something. I'm not going to certainly defend cases of singular police excesses, but here we are discussing something. We're not discussing isolated incidents of one student here or one student there being picked up.
Right. You're talking of a wider.
What is happening?
Yes.
I'm talking of a much wider clamp down on dissent, which is to instill fear in society as a whole. When you pick up a 21-year-old activist, you're not going against Disha Ravi. You're going against an entire section of the youth who will be stopped by their parents from getting onto the roads and doing anything political or protesting. You're trying to muzzle protest.
Right.
Now, that is not something that I think state governments, apart from the BJP, are doing.
Well, you know, some may challenge that, because if you go around India and you look at states and state governments, there are some deeply disturbing illiberal strains that we're seeing. But Dushyant Dave,
may well be.
Dushyant Dave,
may well be.
Okay.
But I think that may well be, but I think as part of a sort of a wider, very well thought out strategy, this is something that the central government is doing. And I don't think just because the states are doing it makes it right.
Okay, I'm sure Deshratan would want to respond to that. But let me first come to Dushyant Dave. Dushyant Dave, is it often the case that we, particularly in the metropolitan media, just as we only focus on the center, we don't look at states, when we think of the judiciary, we only look at the higher judiciary, but it's really, if you look at some of these benches, whether it's Allahabad, Mumbai, other places, Sessions Court, that's where you really begin to see this kind of, more bolder, almost more risk-taking kind of approach, if one were to even call it that?
See, let me first, say a couple of things. I agree with Professor Varshney completely. In India, I must say, this is my experience as a lawyer for 42 years, and I don't mean any disrespect to the political class. We are a democracy and we should be democracy. I respect, political parties also, have nothing to do with any one of them. In India, democracy functions during only elections. Once the elections are over, the authoritarianism sets in.
Right.
Constitutionalism is forgotten. Constitutional morality is a thing of past. And this is affecting not just the executive and the legislatures, but this is affecting judiciary to a big extent.
Right.
And I must say one thing, that the judiciary really, the bail is a rule, jail is an exception. And that's what should be guiding, in all these bail matters.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the judiciary has completely forgotten. There are judgments after judgments of the Supreme Court's constitutional benches on anticipatory bail, for example. It's one of the finest judgments that Senior Justice Chandrachud wrote, where he said that anticipatory bail must be granted.
And
now,
people are forgetting that. Okay.
No court in the country is willing to forget, remember that and, follow that. It's a sad commentary on judiciary.
Well, let's see, perhaps, is the time...
Just a sec. Responding to Mr. Nigam, don't blame judiciary for sending them to remand. The police picked them up. I call upon him to request the Delhi police to arrest Piyush Goyal, Anurag Thakur and Mr. Mishra, who made much more provocative and seditious statements leading to violence and deaths of innocent men, women and children.
Right.
He won't have the courage to do that. Delhi police has acted, I would say, completely out of line in ignoring that. There is a petition pending in Delhi High Court. The Honorable Chief Justice of Delhi High Court is not willing to hear that petition.
Okay,
this is filed by
okay. Okay,
so it's not right to blame judiciary.
Okay,
Judiciary is wrong in sending her to police remand and to sending her to.
Okay. Let me move on. And this is on the day of the anniversary, in fact, of the riots. But Ashutosh Varshney, what is the? I mean, as you write, is the world now increasingly kind of noticing this shift in India? Because as you pointed out, institutes which track, the sort of democratic temperature of countries, there's the VDEM Institute of Sweden, there's Freedom House of USA, there's the Economist Intelligence Unit, all have basically mapped a downward slide in India's rankings, and that is last year, some of them. And now you say their latest reports are going to come out.
Yeah, very soon. I think sometime by April or May. Both Freedom House and VDEM Institute, those are two most widely read by the scholars and political activists, civil society activists and scholars.
Yeah.
They'll come out in April, and in April or May. And last year, both wrote that India was on the verge of losing its status as a democracy, because other than elections is not satisfying any other criterion of democratic conduct, and the executive is indulging in the kinds of excesses and the kinds of attacks on institutions of oversight and civil liberties that are beginning to negate even the electoral value of India's electoral record of India as a democracy. So we have to see what will happen in the next 2 months. But either India will be called partly free, or once again the two institutions will issue a warning that India is about to lose its democratic status.
Right.
And that is you see, because elections can only be the minimal requirement. Elections, what governments do in those 5 years between elections, is also very, very important. It can't just be ignored, and only elections cannot be the way to define democracies.
Okay, Disha Ravi, now the government could turn around and supporters of the government like yourselves could turn around and say, we don't care, some institute ranks India somewhere, how does it matter? But isn't this counterintuitive? India is trying to exercise its power strategically across the world. It may not have the kind of economic clout China does, but it does have democratic capital that gives it a lot of extra weight in world capitals everywhere. And now, with this kind of backsliding, you're actually risking squandering that. So it's not just an image issue. It's also your place in the world. Strategic.
Vasu, I don't think it is backsliding, but the fact remains that a democracy.
You don't think it's backsliding? All these reports, they're all.
If you ask all the international travels who go abroad, and when they tell you and come back, the stature of India, which has increased in the eyes of the common people in the world, I don't know what institutes what kind of studies and ranking they are doing. Let them do it. We have no control over it.
Intelligence unit. This is, I mean.
No.
India has fallen from 27th to 53rd in its democratic rankings in 2015 to between 2015 to 2020, since the Modi government came to power.
Let them do it. Let them do it. It does not bother the Indian government. And secondly, let me tell you, the democracies, as we know, exist and are based on rule of law. And now to say there's something beyond law, we will be propounding chaos. And secondly, a party which is implementing its manifesto, which is a promise letter which has gone to the people regarding CAA or, for example, 370.
Right.
The people have voted that government on that basis.
Okay.
You are saying it is going down the democracy. It is, in fact, keeping its promises to the people, for which it went to the people and got elected. And therefore, you accuse that government there is no democracy.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Nigam, are civil liberties a defining feature of democracies or not?
Yes, certainly. Certainly. But if somebody commits a crime, it is important that the law take its due course.
Okay.
You can't be disagreeing with that.
I'm out of time. We'll have to leave it there. But as Ashu Varshney points out in his piece, that democracies don't curb press freedoms by intimidating dissenting journalists, don't attack universities and students for ideological nonconformity, don't equate adversaries with enemies, don't celebrate lynch mobs, and do not cultivate judicial civility. So there's that as well. But we're out of time. Thank you all so much for joining us on Reality Check. It's been terrific. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye. Welcome back to the special edition of Reality Check, the day on which the 22-year-old activist Disha Ravi has got bail from a court in Delhi, a session court in Delhi, a court order which has reverberations far beyond this particular case. Before we get into dissecting that some more, let's just listen in to Disha Ravi's mother's first emotional response to the news that her daughter might be walking out of jail soon.
When Disha will come back, first thing what will you do?
मेरे बेटी को ಅಪ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅವಳಿಗೆ ಊಟ ಮಾಡಿಸ್ಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋದಷ್ಟೇ ನನಗೆ ಇರೋದು.
आप उसे खाना खिलाएंगे when she comes first. For last 9 days जब दिशा आपसे फोन पे बात कर रही थी, आपके हस्बैंड से, she was talking to her parents. How was she? Was she strong? Was she giving you confidence? Were you giving her confidence?
No. ಅವಳೇ ತುಂಬಾ ಸ್ಟ್ರಾಂಗ್ ಇದ್ದಾಳೆ. ಅವಳೇ ನಮಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ಲು, ಸ್ಟ್ರಾಂಗ್ ಆಗಿರಿ, ಏನೂ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ, ಎಲ್ಲ ಸರಿಯಾಗಿ ವಾಪಸ್ ಬರ್ತೀನಿ, ನಾನೇನು ತಪ್ಪು ಮಾಡಿಲ್ಲ, ನೀವು ಸ್ಟ್ರಾಂಗ್ ಆಗಿರಿ ಅಂತ.
दिशा आपको कॉन्फिडेंस दे रही थी, आपको दिलासा दे रही थी. दिशा कैसे, आप क्या लग रहा था जब आप दिशा को वीडियो पे देखा आपने उसको?
नहीं
फोन कॉल में
मुझको फील हो गया वो बहुत स्ट्रांग है, बहुत बोल्ड है, ऐसे फील हो गए.
Are you a confident, strong mother after the last 9-10 days, after everything that you have been through? आपको और ज्यादा स्ट्रेंथ, आपको कॉन्फिडेंस और ज्यादा महसूस हो रहा है?
अभी हो रहा है,
अभी और ज्यादा हो रहा है. What is your message to the parents? Because a lot of parents have also become scared after watching this news. Just 22 years old, college student. A lot of parents have become apprehensive. What is your message as a parent to them?
ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ದಾರಿಲಿ ಹೋದಾಗ ನಾವು ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಪ್ರೋತ್ಸಾಹ ಕೊಡ್ಬೇಕಲ್ವಾ. ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ನಾವು ಕೆಲವು ಸರಿ ತರ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಆದಾಗ ನಾವು ಸ್ಟ್ರಾಂಗ್ ಆಗಿ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಬೆನ್ನಿಗೆ ನಿಂತ್ಕೋಬೇಕು ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಮೇಡಮ್.
Okay, Disha Ravi's mother there. Let's just start off by going to panel. We have Geeta Bhatt with us, political analyst, supports RSS BJP. Also, we have with us Yuvan, who is an activist and Disha's friend and colleague joining us. Siddharth Luthra is also with us, senior advocate of the Supreme Court. Let me just start with you, Yuvan, that we just saw a very emotional mother there, Disha Ravi's, and the question that my colleague asked her, put that to you as well, that as a young person, as an activist, after what happened to Disha, does that make you and others like you apprehensive? Or after this order, do you feel perhaps somewhat emboldened?
Firstly, it was heartening to see a worried mother speak. And we are very happy as friends and colleagues, as part of various youth networks, to see that Disha has been granted bail, and we hope that the Delhi police has the institutional integrity, given what the judge today has said, a range of things. He said there's not an iota of evidence given by the Delhi police to implicate her, and you're running other things which says that you can't minister to the government's vanity and so on and so forth. So I
right,
hope
in fact,
against
okay. Yeah, in fact, she might be walking out at any time. We'll just let you know if that is, that's the case or not. But no, but Yuan, my question is that would this make you apprehensive to continue your activist role or not?
Yeah, to answer that question, what has been the response of various young activists has been that of fear. You speak up for something you love, you participate in matters of governance, or you might be jailed. That's been a very palpable fear. Parents are petrified. We've been facing the backlash of that. And I hope Disha's bail sets precedents, and today's order and the judge's articulation sets a precedence, and people, we hope that young people will come forward and give solidarity.
But you're going to stick to it. You're going to keep going. You personally. Yes. Okay.
I'm going to stick to it, and I hope all other young people.
All others. Okay. Siddharth Luthra, we've often on this show had the conversation about the sedition law and the misuse of it. When you look at today's order, when it talks beyond the merits of this particular case, when it talks of how sedition can't be invoked to minister to the wounded vanity of governments, citizens can't be put behind bars simply because they choose to disagree with state policy. How significant do you believe is this language?
I think it's very important because normally in cases such as sedition, we rarely find people getting relief or bail at the sessions level. You have to end up going to the High Court. So I think we've had a very clear case, and I compliment the legal team, which has done an outstanding job. And I also compliment the judge, who is a part of this larger system, who has made it very clear that if you, the state, will lock up people frivolously, well, there is the judicial system to keep you in check. It is unfortunate that such arrests take place. And I was listening to the young activists, and I think it's unfortunate that we had to reach a stage where the person gets arrested and is taken out on bail. Why do these arrests happen? Today, it's a stark reminder that the arrest was absolutely legally unjustified.
Right.
And the message that should go out is not just for this case, but message across the board that there is access to justice, and there should be access to justice. It's most important from my perspective. Okay.
Interesting.
This is the concern I always feel.
Right. Vikas Singh is also with us, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court, former Additional Solicitor General of India. Vikas Singh, do you think that orders like this and others as well we are seeing in the recent past will send out that message to the government and to enforcement agencies to be a little more circumspect in going after people, particularly those who are just seen as simply being targeted because they may be critical of the regime of the day? Or will it be business as usual?
Well, Srinivasan, first thing I must tell you that today we are seeing trial court orders coming up with such profound judgments, and normally this front page news used to be hogged by Supreme Court and High Court, but now I must compliment this trial court judge for coming out with this bail order. Number two, if you see the sedition law, this was brought in the Indian Penal Code in 1870, and when we had the Constitution, where we provided for right to free speech to every citizen, unfortunately our Constitution doesn't give it to the press only; it gives it to every citizen. So when we had this free speech brought in the Constitution as a fundamental right, in 1962 a question arose whether sedition can still be allowed to remain in the statute book. And the Supreme Court, while upholding the law of sedition, very categorically said that sedition can only be invoked if there is a direct evidence of inciting violence. Now, there was nothing in this case to show that Disha was inciting violence. And secondly, if you balance the fundamental right vis-a-vis the sedition law, definitely you have to err towards the freedom of speech. You can't err towards the sedition. So I personally feel that it's a very welcome step, and it's very good that a trial judge has given a bail order.
In fact, in fact, we can confirm with the news that Disha Ravi has in fact been released from jail, and she is walking out of jail as we speak, and we will try and get you some updates on that as well. Geeta Bhatt, do you also welcome this order?
Well, this order which has come from the court has to be respected, and also to be noted that while giving this order, the judge also mentioned that that the court is conscious of the fact that it is very difficult to provide evidence for the offence of conspiracy, and the police is at a nascent stage of investigation and is in the process of collecting various evidences. Now,
but
yeah,
that is Geeta Bhatt, somewhat I would say slightly optimistic take on the order, because the order actually completely demolishes the police case. It says there is scanty, sketchy evidence. Let me just read out the highlights. There is scanty, sketchy evidence against Disha. No direct evidence establishing link between her and violence, between her and so-called Khalistani organizations. Creating WhatsApp groups can't be an offence, etc., etc., etc. So, Geeta Bhatt, I mean, this is not a good look for the police.
Yes, this is definitely there in the order, but along with it, it is also taking cognizance of the fact that it is still at a preliminary stage, the investigation, and also Vasuji, yesterday when her one-day custody was there in the Chief Metropolitan Magistrate's Court, at that time. When it was asked that one-day custody is needed basically for having a confrontation with the co-accused, because she has put the burden on the co-accused.
Yes.
Along with it, at that time, the magistrate said that for a fair investigation was required, because there has been a vituperous campaign in disrupting peace and in spreading of hatred. And hence,
but
for this purpose, the investigating agencies, they need to be given enough amount of time and chance, so
time is one second. Time is time.
Interrogation or confrontation.
Hold on. But
this
I just want to respond.
Okay. Just a second. Siddharth, yes. Siddharth want to comment. Siddharth.
The question I think we need to ask our friend Ms. Bhatt is, why arrest? If you have scanty evidence, why arrest at all? Is it because after all, once the law changed and it became specific, that there has to be a reason to believe to arrest. You see, the law is now very clear. Even the CRPC is clear. It's no longer the old regime when it was nebulous.
Yeah, why arrest?
Once that is changed, how can you just arrest a person? There's a serious problem I have with arrest, and I must tell you, you arrest when a person is going to flee. You arrest when a person has committed perhaps a heinous crime like murder, or you need to collect evidence. In this case, I don't see any of those parameters being met. And I'm sorry to say, but it's a very weak submission to make that, well, the police should be given a free hand. Of course, they should be given a free hand to investigate, but not to arrest.
Okay. Let me
just
get.
That's sacrosanct.
Okay, that's a good point. Let me get Vikas Singh quickly, because I think he needs to leave. Vikas Singh, that's a good point. Why arrest? Investigate, but do you have to arrest in every case?
No, I Srinivasa, don't agree for even a registration of a case of this kind, because registration of a case should start only after there is direct evidence of involvement. Now, when you look at the ingredient of sedition, if there is no direct evidence of involvement of incitement to offence, the offence is not made out. So, if the offence is not made out, why do I even register a case? What to say of arrest? So, this is not a case for registration of a case at all. And when you see the right to free speech, the Supreme Court as early as in the early 50s has said that even if there is something obnoxious, at the cost of, to ensure free speech, you should allow its luxurious growth rather than, trim something which is obnoxious. So, everything that is said is not meant to be trimmed. The free speech only will develop up to democracy. So, anybody who wants to say anything which the government is not happy about should be allowed to say whatever he has to say. And it's not that every time if somebody says something, you have to be booked for, sedition or something like that.
That's okay.
Thank
significant.
You.
So, you're saying forget even the stage of arrest, this did not even merit the registration of a case, leave alone get to the arrest stage. Colin Gonsalves is with us, lawyer, particularly in the field of human rights, civil liberties. Colin Gonsalves, while many people, I wouldn't say everyone, a lot of people have welcomed this order, do you think that this and similar orders like granting bail to Varavara Rao is going to see some sort of shift in the way that the state and the enforcement agencies will behave or not? Colin Gonsalves, if we can go to you, though there seems to be an issue with the signal. So let's try and come back to Colin Gonsalves. Let me actually take that question.
I can hear you very clearly.
Okay, Colin, I think we have you. Yes, if you heard my question, Colin, go ahead.
Yes.
Yes.
I heard your question, and I must say it's a very happy day for all freedom-loving people, because this is a judgment of a historic kind. It's delivered by a lower court, a trial court, but it's a sensational judgment, and it will open the path for many, many judges who've got the feeling over the past few months and years that the state is not doing what it was expected to do. The state is engaging in spreading terror by the use of law, by making false cases.
Right.
And I do hope that people don't, this will send a signal to the judiciary that it's possible to be brave and not be frightened by the state government, and stand up to the state and allow people to go off on bail.
Right.
And particularly at the time of remand, I must say the remand is done in this country mechanical by cyclo-styled orders, which the clerk signs and the judge signs, and it must stop. At the time of remand, the judge must say, show me the evidence. And that's what this judge did, show me the evidence. And if you can't show evidence, I would appeal to judges throughout the country.
Right.
Do not take away even a second of freedom of a person at the remand stage. Do not allow that. Ask the question, show me the evidence.
Show me the evidence. That's very important. Let me just go across. I spoke earlier to Indira Jaisingh, who, as I mentioned, is the lawyer for Varavara Rao, who got bail, and asked her that same question about the significance of these orders. Bail for Disha Ravi today, and just a day ago it was bail for Varavara Rao, who is one of the accused in the Bhima Koregaon case. And joining me is Indira Jaisingh, a senior Supreme Court advocate. She's also someone who's the lawyer for Varavara Rao. Indira Jaisingh, thank you for joining me. Now, we've just seen these two orders back to back, bail for Varavara Rao yesterday, for Disha Ravi today. It's interesting because it comes at a time when there have been questions about whether the judiciary is doing enough to protect civil liberties, individual freedoms, and then you have these orders.
Yes. I think we have seen a consistent pattern of misuse of laws, more particularly the law relating to sedition and the relating to UAP, that is acts of terrorism. And I personally feel the judiciary has woken up to the fact that laws can be abused and misused. And I think that is what accounts for the kind of orders that you're seeing today. If you take the Disha Ravi bail, or when my state 22-year-old girl of the country which applauds this kind of attack. And I think the judiciary has woken up to the fact that there is a rule of law in this country, at least I hope so, and that it's their job to make sure that the law is not abused. I will tell you a little bit about the Varavara Rao judgment in a little while, but this is my what I feel about the fantastic judgment on Disha Ravi.
Right. On Varavara Rao, I wanted to ask you, because the bail seemed to be largely based on health grounds, but does it have wider implications as well?
See, Srinivas, the wider implication is that the courts are willing to look at conditions of detention of prisoners. The judgment refers to the Nelson Mandela rules. What it says is that the courts can pierce the veil of the prison bars if they come to the conclusion that the fundamental rights of prisoners behind closed doors are being violated. Seem to have forgotten all this jurisprudence which seems to be just locked up in our law books. And I think the main achievement, if you can call it that, of our team of lawyers, including me and Anand and various other people who worked on the case, is that we unlocked that door. And what we said is that prisoners don't lose their fundamental rights simply by virtue of incarceration. Yes, they lose the right to freedom of movement, but can you torture them? No. Can you deny them the right to health? No. So the significance of the judgment is that the right to health is primary. And the court has said that if we send him back to prison, we are endangering his life. So that's a very, very important consideration. The second one, of course, is the recognition of the fact that the existing conditions in our prisons, we were dealing with Taloja jail, but all other jails are no different. Can you believe it? That they had only 3 Ayurvedic doctors on duty in that prison when they're dealing with people with amazing amount of comorbidities in the time of the pandemic, okay? So the court is saying that the health condition of these people who are above the age of 60, 70, 80, I mean, deterioration in health is natural for anybody at that age. It's normal. And to send such a person back to prison is to endanger their life, because there is an incompatibility between the right to health and what the state is able to provide in its prisons, and that entitles. Of course, the really important thing about this judgment is that it bypasses the UAPA Act completely, and it is actually saying that your fundamental rights are peremptory norms.
Right.
And a UAPA which says bail should be denied cannot be allowed to prevail over that. It's the judgment which protects and preserves the right to life, as I think all judges should be doing. I'm very pleased.
In fact, I wanted to ask you about that, because you're right. The judgment does say that continued incarceration will violate Article 21, which is the right to life and liberty. It also says that we don't appreciate or agree with the NIA's stand that no relief should be granted because of the gravity of the offence. Would this have consequences for some of the others who are also accused in the Bhima Koregaon case, people like Stan Swami and so on, who also are fairly elderly and have health ailments?
It has obvious implications. Stan Swami's bail application on medical grounds is being argued before the NIA court, and I'm sure they will cite this judgment before the NIA court as well. But, you know, beyond the obvious benefits that this judgment has for all prisoners in this country, in fact, in one of my tweets, I said, okay, so Varavara Rao had medical help and he had, lawyers that came forward to protect him. But there are thousands of others in our jails. Can we not spare a thought for them? What are the facilities in prison to ensure that our prisoners are, skin diseases are so rampant in our prisons. I can't even begin to tell you. If anybody were to do an investigation into what goes on. I read an article actually in the Wire which says even the caste system is alive and thriving in our prisons. But let me also say, apart from the obvious implications, you know very well that today there is a report on the table about arson. Now that the evidence against these people has been planted through malware, okay? And that issue is definitely going to the Bombay High Court, okay? So what I want to tell you is, you build this bogey of ABC is a terrorist. And then you say, you create an atmosphere of, we can't touch these terrorists, and that's the so-called gravity of the crime. What is the gravity of the crime? What evidence do you have against these people? Nothing, except as we are now saying, plant.
Yeah, but in...
Yes, the court of law to decide whether the evidence is planted or not.
Right. But in conclusion, though, Indra Jai Singh, is it correct to say that this bail, though, largely deals with the question of his health and how he cannot continue to be incarcerated on those grounds? The charges against him, part of the Bhima Koregaon case, as you mentioned, the fact that they were inciting violence and they had links to Maoist organizations, those still stand and those still have to be successfully challenged by you and his lawyers.
Definitely, and we mentioned, you please read the judgment. It records very clearly that Varavar Rao and his lawyers said, we are ready to stand trial, okay? So it doesn't bother us that the charges stand. What does bother us is that these people, unlike people under other laws, are unable to get bail because of the way in which the UAPA law has been drafted and the way it has been. By the way, the other thing you need to know is that the judges record that the delay in the trial itself is a violation of fundamental rights. Okay, 2.5 years, and you know the charges have not been framed as yet. What happens to our presumption of innocence? Okay, so in that I think the judgment makes history. It opens a window. All right, I'm not saying that this is, you know, liberation for everybody, the 16 people who have been accused in the case, but the fight for justice has begun.
Okay. The fight for justice has begun, and as you said, the courts have started to wake up. So interesting times. We're out of time. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, Indra Jaisingh, you want a last word? Go ahead. Go ahead.
No. I think courts have woken up because they've seen a pattern of abuse of law. I said somewhere else, when you use law to break the law, you're living in a state of lawlessness. And I think the courts can see now the lawlessness in front of their eyes, and well, that's it. The Bombay High Court said that as a constitutional court, we really need to rise to the situation and protect the fundamental rights of citizens. It's a really, really very important judgment. I'm very pleased with it.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Indra Jaisingh, for that. Thanks very much. We'll take a short break at this point and come back with much more on NDTV.